In the heart of Georgia in 1843, a chilling secret lay buried beneath the cotton fields of Riverbend Plantation. For years, the Caldwell family ruled this 400-acre estate, their wealth measured in bales of cotton and the terror they wielded over the enslaved people who worked the land. But in the dead of winter, one man's quiet vengeance would turn their world upside down and forge a legend that still haunts the South's memory. This is the story of Silas, a slave whose desperate, calculated act, salting his master's well with poison, would become one of the most infamous tales of plantation folklore. Before we dive deeper into this disturbing saga, tell me where you're watching from in the comments below. If this is your first time here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you won't miss any more spooky historical stories. Now, let's step back into 1843, when slavery was entrenched in Southern life, and imagine the oppressive world Silas inhabited. Riverbend Plantation lay on a bend of the Broad River, its fertile red soil yielding record cotton crops year after year. By 1840, Georgia had nearly 289 enslaved people working its fields and plantations. Georgia Encyclopedia.org, the lifeblood of the booming cotton economy. Much of this cotton was shipped to textile mills up north and overseas, funding the lavish lives of the handful of planters. The Caldwells were among those planters. Richard Rick Caldwell, age 48, and his wife Clara, age 43, presided over Riverbend with stern authority. Rick, a broad-shouldered man with a cold gaze, ran the operation. Clara maintained the house and occasionally took in sewing work from Savannah's elite. Near the great house stood the slave quarters, a row of wooden cabins housing over 50 enslaved men, women, and children. Rations were meager for people forced to labor dawn to dusk in the fields. As historian Morgan Latta recalled of Stagville Plantation, most enslaved families survived on rations of cornmeal and salted pork, YourAudioTour.com. Silas himself could often be found hoeing weeds or lifting heavy cotton bales on nothing more than watery cornmeal gruel and a sliver of salt pork. Yet Clark and Rick Caldwell paid little heed to their dietary needs. They were far more interested in discipline and obedience. Riverbend's overseer was a hulking, brutal man named Ambrose Turner, age 42, who took sadistic pleasure in breaking spirits. Turner's favorite cruelty was the lash. When he broke a slave's skin with his cat-o'-nine-tails whip, he often poured salt and hot pepper into the raw wounds, a practice so cruel that it kept injuries from putrefying, but added indescribable pain. And Wikipedia.org. Silas had seen Turner do it countless times. After a whipping, Turner would yell, "Get up and wash it down with brine." One elderly slave told Silas, "They mix it thick and rub it in with corn husks to keep wounds from rotting in Wikipedia.org. The salt stung the torn flesh, prolonging agony for days. Stories circulated among the quarters of families ruined by Turner's violence. Men and women mauled, branded, or left crippled for merely stumbling or dropping a tool. Yet of all Turner's cruelties, Silas feared one thing most: the sickening grin Turner and the Caldwells wore when planning casual executions of troublemakers. In those moments, slaves whispered that any small offense could be a death sentence. Rick Caldwell would say, "Discipline is the only language these people speak," as he nodded to Turner, and Clara smirked. Silas learned to watch the faces of the planter family, and Turner with cold attention. He noted every pattern, Turner's routine, how he sometimes fell asleep in a chair in late afternoon, his lantern unlit, Clara's habits, the way she insisted on cleanliness around the well, even on freezing mornings, Rick's schedule, which nights he demanded the better cot, and which nights he climbed into his private carriage for town meetings. From his youth, Silas was about 30 by 1843. The only person he trusted was his wife, Eliza, age 28. Eliza had been born on Riverbend, too, and she nursed him as a boy, when the master's bench was off limits to care for babies. They married in secret among the cabins, their small bonds the only light in Silas's dark world. But in late 1841, their world shattered. One cold December afternoon, Eliza accidentally spilled some cornmeal from the pantry into Clara Caldwell's sewing basket. Clara flew into rage. To her, any hint of a slave taking white woman's provisions was a mortal insult. Before Silas's eyes, Turner dragged Eliza into the main house and whipped her raw. Rick watched, nodding. By the time Eliza collapsed, 6 staves deep, her cries echoed across the yard. Clara and Rick declared her undeserving of this world, and they had her sold off the plantation the very next week. Silas never saw her again. Rumors said she was taken to a plantation in South Carolina, where she could not survive the winter. That moment changed Silas. A piece of his soul had frozen in his chest. The trauma of losing Eliza fueled a slow-burning hatred. Silas was careful never to show his anger, hiding it like a coiled snake. The Caldwells and Turner believed Silas was blissfully obedient. He said, "Yes, sir," and "No, ma'am," like a machine, hardly speaking at all. Every night after supper, he lay in his tiny cabin, planning and watching. The winter of 1842 left marks on the plantation, bloody streaks where Eliza had fallen, still visible on the whippings post. To everyone else, Eliza was simply gone, but Silas remembered every scream, every tear she shed. By early 1843, Silas had come to a dangerous conclusion. The only justice left was to make the masters feel what he felt. If he could not free his people or change the system, he would at least destroy the Caldwells. His mind worked like a finely sharpened blade. He would use the very means of survival against them. The family's lifeblood was water, the crystal well that fed the Caldwell kitchen, water troughs, and even the livestock. If he could poison that well, the family might perish without a sound, their disappearance chalked up to natural causes. Over months he tested ideas. The plantation's medicine chest, locked under Clara's watch, contained deadly substances. One night Silas obtained a small vial labeled arsenic, poison, while Turner slept off a bender. Under cover of darkness he drained it, mixing the grainy contents into a bowl of salt used for curing pork. Silas knew arsenic would dissolve easily in water, and if enough was added, it could kill without immediate detection. He hid the salt bowl among ordinary lard and turned back into the kitchen before anyone noticed. Turner was passed out drunk, and Clara had retired early after auditing the cook's ledgers. Silas also needed plenty of regular salt. The Caldwells bought bulk shipments of coarse road salt each autumn for curing meats and preserving food. Over the summer, he helped haul several barrels of salt from the Jacksonville Merchant into storage, taking care to hide a bit in different corners of the slave kitchen. He fashioned rope harnesses to carry heavy sacks quietly. Each bit of salt he smuggled to his cabin under the guise of kosher needs for the cellar hogs. Little did the masters know that salt would make their own water deadly. In November of 1843, everything aligned. Plantation tensions were at a boiling point. Cotton prices had fallen, and Rick Caldwell decided to travel to Savannah on business, taking Clara and young Thomas Caldwell, age 12, with him. Rick insisted on leaving Overseer Turner in charge. He said he trusted Ambrose to keep everything running. In reality, Rick could not stand Turner's smirking attitude and wanted to show he had better connections. Before leaving, Rick ordered a final humiliating punishment, a whisking of a young slave boy named Simon, age 17, for allegedly spying on white folk. Clara watched Turner swing his whip, and when Simon collapsed, she coldly remarked, "Let him learn his lesson." Silas felt bile rise but said nothing. Instead, he noted the date. That night, Rick and Clara loaded the carriage with cotton samples and ledger books. Silas observed their departure from a distance. The master and mistress climbed inside, wishing each other good riddance, and set off down the muddy road toward Savannah. Once the Caldwells had been gone an hour, Silas made his move. The night was moonless and cold, perfect for what he intended. He gathered his closest ally, a gaunt, quiet field hand named Elijah, age 24. The two men crept from the quarters, tools hidden under cloaks, and headed toward the stone-lined well by the Caldwell house. Riding horses had bolted at the master's sudden departure, and Turner, drunk on brandy, was snoring on the porch in his greatcoat. Under an oak tree shadow, Silas laid out the plan to Elijah in whispers. The well was unguarded. Turner would likely stumble into bed soon, and no slave dared approach the house at night. Silas counted the arsenic and salt. He had enough arsenic to make 2 big potions of water lethal. A tiny pinch half a teaspoon could kill an adult. Plenty of road salt lay ready to clog and preserve any evidence. He handed Elijah a burlap sack with 2 fist-sized jars of white powder and slipped a length of stout rope into Elijah's hands. Silas himself tied a strong leather belt around his waist to carry salt. If Turner awoke, they could bribe him, Silas thought grimly. If not, it would be too late. Then, taking a deep breath of icy night air, Silas and Elijah approached the well. This was it. Silas bowed his head in silent prayer, not for forgiveness, but for resolve. He whispered, "May the Master's waters take what he gave us." He tipped the first jar into the well. The white powder hit the water with a tiny sizzle. Arsenic sank out of sight at once. He dumped the second jar. Almost immediately the water in the pool took on a faint, oily sheen. He salted it. 8 full handfuls of coarse salt heaved into the well, one by one. The brackish smell spread as the salt dissolved. Silas watched the water churn. Each scoop took effort. The stone well was deep, almost 25 feet. Elijah aided by hauling up more salt from the barrel hidden behind the barn. They worked quickly, their breath steaming in the freezing air. By the time Silas finished, the well water tasted nothing like the life-giving spring it was. It smelled faintly of copper and bitterness. No birds or animals dared drink near it that night. The deed was done. They dismantled the disguise, loosening stones to disturb evidence of their footsteps, scattering a few empty salt grain sacks in the woods to look like a random theft, and even slowly lowering one of the horses from Rick's barn into a side paddock. Horses were known to jump fences after all. By 4 a.m., Silas and Elijah crept back to the quarters and cleaned themselves of salt dust. In bed, they lay quietly, hearts pounding, waiting for dawn. Morning came with a frost. As usual, the slaves awoke before sunrise to begin chores. Silas walked to the kitchen to start the morning fire and pretend normalcy. At 7 a.m., he heard it. Turner's muffled screams. Elijah burst into the cookhouse. "Silas, up! Master Caldwell is sick! Master and Mrs.!" Silas's blood ran cold. He rushed outside. Across the yard, Emil, Rick Caldwell's personal groom, was overturning a wooden bucket of water at the foot of the porch steps, cursing, "Nasty, bitter, too much salt?" Inside the house was chaos. Rick Caldwell, face pale, forehead beaded with sweat, doubled over the washstand, retching violently. Clara lay on the bed, eyes rolled back, shaking and crying out. Young Thomas was outside, pounding on the door. "Mother! Mother! Let me in!" But Turner had locked the door and cowered with fear on the porch. Silas saw Thomas's lips had turned a sickly gray. Silas helped rip the door open and hauled Clara onto the bed, while Turner frantically called for quinine or smelling salts. The symptoms were horrifying. Clara's stomach cramping so fiercely that she was convulsing, vomit flecked with blood splattering on the quilt. Rick's skin was clammy, eyes glassy, and each breath forced painful gasps. Both complained of excruciating cramps and endless vomiting. A town doctor, hired by the plantation for such emergencies, arrived mid-morning. He tasted the water. It was impossibly salty and metallic. He scribbled on his notepad. Silas barely listened. He could almost taste the arsenic by looking at their faces. The doctor shook his head. "Poison, evidently. I'll do what I can, but it's serious." By noon, Clara was already unresponsive, her cheeks drawn and parchment thin. Rick somehow managed a broken sentence. "I feel like the river's boiling in me. Something's in the water." 10 hours after drinking, Clara died with a final horrible scream. Rick collapsed into delirium, ranting about blood and boiling. In those agonizing hours, Silas stood in the corner of the room, heart pounding but face impassive. He bit his lip to keep from laughing. Each retch and bloody spasm of pain from the Caldwells felt like a heartbeat of justice to him. Yet he showed no joy outwardly. Instead, he feigned panic and concern, even hugging Thomas as the boy sobbed. The plan had worked too well. Clara was dead, and Rick seemed near it. The doctor told Turner to bundle away Clara's body discreetly. "Bury her without a fuss. No need for a spectacle," he said. Turner did so by noon. Meanwhile, Silas discreetly passed Elijah a congratulatory nod. 2 of his masters were already gone. Turner eventually walked Rick into the next room to keep him alive as long as possible. Through the afternoon, Silas watered crops in the yard while feigning an innocent fatigue from the cold. In truth, he watched Rick's door like a hawk, ready for one final moment. As twilight fell, Rick Caldwell, pale and trembling, lost consciousness. By 9:30 p.m., he was dead. The plantation doctor later wrote it off as fatal poisoning, probably accidental, noting Clara's earlier collapse. No one suspected foul play. Turner shivered openly that it might have been some bitter well water or a family curse. Silas and the other slaves simply kept their silence. Silas's deed was complete. He had salted the well and ended the Caldwells. Exhausted, he returned to the quarters late that night. Elijah quietly kissed his wife for bravery. The other slaves mumbled congratulations in the dark. No one danced or laughed. It was too grave, too complete. But a cold satisfaction settled over Silas. Justice, at last, had a taste. When Rick Caldwell did not send any letters or money back to Riverbend for weeks, worry set in among the neighbors. Rick had been a disciplined man with a strict schedule. It was unlike him to disappear. On January 5, 1844, a delegation of plantation owners arrived, led by Sheriff Harold Quinn of Montgomery County. Quinn, a burly, no-nonsense man in his 50s, scoured Riverbend for answers. He summoned everyone of interest: Ambrose Turner, Mr. Green, the Caldwell son by Clara's first marriage, and all the slaves. Silas was questioned as the head field hand who worked closely with Mr. Caldwell. His interrogation was stern. "When did you last see Mr. Caldwell?" Silas replied evenly. "About sunrise after he left yesterday, sir. He fetched water, tasted it, and said it was strong. That's all I remember." Quinn scribbled notes, but his eyes lingered on Silas's calm face. The doctor's notes were troubling. Arsenic poisoning nearly certain. Remains of salt found, one was heard mumbling. They tested Clara's body for poison as best they could in 1844, using a thallus test, not very reliable. Bones of cattle from the trough were also examined. They too showed salt crystals, but nothing conclusive of arsenic. It dissolves, leaving no stain. Investigators found the well water tank cracked, some broken stones. "Must be age, sir," Turner insisted. But Quinn noted footprints and drag marks in the frost around the well, partly obscured now. A few witnesses, Nanny Patsy and Butler James, reported seeing two shadowy figures with sacks by the well the night of the poisoning. Quinn's face grimaced. He snapped questions at Silas. "Slaves also say they saw you there, Silas. Care to explain?" Silas feigned confusion. "Sheriff, there are many who fetch water. I did before sunup, long before Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell got sick." He wiped his hands on his shirt. "Turner always locks the well at night. No one near it after dark. It wasn't me." Quinn found the explanation plausible enough. Silas passed a lie detector of prejudice. As days passed, fear spread through the quarters. Quinn offered a reward for anyone coming forward. But the slaves stuck to their code. Not one would blab. They knew Silas had been like a ghost for years, and he could have done it alone. If he had help, they took the secret to their graves. Turner tried to bribe or threaten them, but their only interest was survival. No one spoke his name or Elijah's. By February, the official report declared Rick Caldwell's death an unfortunate accident, probably due to drinking iced water while overheated, combined with unknown toxins. Clara's death was blamed on a fall during illness. Quinn left Riverbend unsatisfied, but without an arrest. The sheriff insisted the case was odd, but without proof or confession, he could do nothing. With the Caldwells gone and no heirs around, Thomas was shipped off to live with distant relatives in Atlanta. Riverbend Plantation fell into disarray. Ambrose Turner suddenly found himself in charge, but without the authority to abuse. Other whites avoided the place, whispering that the well is cursed. The old well became taboo. Nobody drank from it. Silas and the slaves lived relatively quietly the next few years. They worked for the absentee owners and sold the cotton, just getting by. Silas never drank from that well again. He and Elijah eventually marched away in early 1845 as hired hands to a timber camp up north, some say with false papers, provided by abolitionists. Their fate vanished into the North. It took decades for the truth to trickle out. After the Civil War, at family reunions and church gatherings, some of Riverbend's freed slaves whispered the tale. "Silas did it," an old man would say with a hush. "He poured salt and poison into the water. Same water the Caldwells drank every day." They chuckled that the masters finally learned their own medicine. By 1890, grandchildren of Silas and Elijah were swapping the story around cabin fireplaces. Over time, historians and folklorists heard the fragments. A University of Georgia professor noted oral histories of a well mystery in a 1940 dissertation and .wikipedia.org. But without written records, it remained folklore. Some local children to this day dare each other to taste the Riverbend well water, now emptied. Taste the revenge, they say. For Silas, his act of vengeance had been fatal to himself, too. Had the Caldwells never left, he might never have escaped to freedom. But in silencing the cruel masters, Silas had upended the power structure of Riverbend forever. No thoroughbred planter ever came to rebuild the house. The fields were subdivided over time. Today, only stone ruins and a shallow, dried well mark where Riverbend once stood. Whenever the wind whispers through the longleaf pines at that old bend in the river, some say you can hear the sighs of slaves long free and masters long gone. This story reminds us that even in the darkest chapters of our past, people found ways to strike back, sometimes with the very tools of life itself. What do you think of Silas's revenge? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this tale sent shivers down your spine, hit that like button and subscribe for more haunting stories from history's shadows.